It is Thursday night. Fastest night, fastest hour on the internet. This is Night Terrors Radio. I am joining you by your bedside or wherever you're placing your phone. If it's in that deep, dark place where you have to disinfect it the following morning, I don't need to know about it. However, I'm glad that I'm there with you, and it's nice and cozy and warm, and I love using the word moist. I am, as always, Ash Hamilton with www.horror-fix.com. I am joined by my compatriots, Sean Ed and Rob Pistilli. How are you doing, Sean? How are you doing, Rob?
Doing great.
Very good, sir. Remember, Night Terrors Radio. We're under your bed.
And we are joined by Brian Ward. Brian, I'm going to go ahead and say, is festival director the right terminology, or am I close?
Sure. That works for me. It sounds pretentious to say founder creator, but I guess that's technically what I do. So yeah.
I think we should be pretentious as we want to be tonight.
Yeah.
I think each of us should assume new titles and lands.
There you go. I agree. Let's do
Royal
it.
and Regal. That's where we're headed.
Yes.
We've got Brian
Titles.
Ward. He is the founder, inventor, creator,
Lord God.
international diplomat.
Yes.
Jedi
and
Knight.
above all else, festival director of the Dark History and Horror Con in Champaign, Illinois, which will be going on this weekend. We've got some fantastic things to discuss tonight. We've got a whole week of telling people how horrible our lives are, and we got to condense that into an hour and get to Brian's stuff.
Uh-oh.
Get out your shovels. It's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of work. So
Okay.
first of all, just got to tell everyone, so I'm going to be like in multiple locations this weekend. So we are also going to be representing Horror Fix at the Dark History Con. And so I will be, this is how crazy things are going to be this weekend. I will be in Lexington, Kentucky tomorrow night.
Okay.
Early Saturday, I then drive to Champaign for the Dark History and Horror Con. I will be there all day. And then I head back to Lexington.
Wow.
That night, and I will be there Sunday. But it's going to be a wonderful time at all places. I can't wait. We'll be joined. Sean Ed will also be at the Dark History and Horror Con. We are trying to get as many of our Springfield, Illinois peoples as we possibly can to go there. It's a very, very busy week. But we love busy because busy means at least we're out of the house. And we're not chafing ourselves by watching horrible things being done in deep, dark basements with a German laugh track.
Yeah.
Which is weird to begin with. So,
Fantastic.
for those of you who have not had a live show yet with Sean Edmondson, we have our rotating hosts now. We're giving everybody a little bit of a break. So Sean sometimes will be showing his mug. Also, Brett Blakely, one of our other hosts. Rob hardly is ever going to get a break. Sorry, Rob. It's just not going to happen because you've got the best stickers on your microphone. All I've got are like rowdy little puppets in the background. That's all that I've got. So we've got a lot to talk to you about tonight, Brian. First of all, I absolutely love the Dark History and Horror posters you have going on there. I'm a huge fan of old EC comics. So anything that represents shock suspense stories, Tales from the Crypt, anything like that, I'm just a huge fan of. So love seeing that already. So let's dive into it. So first of all, give us a little bit of a background, like where are we talking to you from right now, and a little bit about yourself for people who may not know you.
Sure. I have been into the hobby that I call dark history. Used to be abnormal psychology, things of that nature, since I was in junior high. I'm almost 48 years old, so 30 years of doing this stuff. Started off with, our state, you had Al Capone. I kind of got into that, and then some of the old West outlaws. And then you find out, Gacy's in our state. When I was in high school, I worked at the library. We used to get all the newspapers. We got like USA Today and the big newspapers. Bundy was executed in '89, so my junior year. So I saw all those. And then the year I graduated, '91, Dahmer gets caught. So it just all, Red Helter Skelter, saw the movie, it's just all come together. And whenever I find something I like, I dig as deep as possible, and I'm still digging.
And it's become like second to baseball, like America's pastime.
Yeah.
It's so
yeah.
strange.
Yeah.
I mean, like, now that we're in the culture of sort of binging, and we're in the culture of binging documentaries specifically for
Yes.
media, there's been a enormous revival behind serial killer history, I would say, in
yeah.
the last 5 years. So
yeah.
it's fertile ground. People are very, very interested in it right now.
Yeah, and what I found is the very first one that I put on in 2014, I believe, was I did it in a VFW hall. It was about 3 hours long. I had 40 people, maybe max. And the next year I was able to jump up to a larger venue, larger audience, and we decided to add in, it was originally just called the Dark History Con, but then we added in horror because as much as people consume it on television and books, magazines, and things like that, there's still enough taboo that they didn't necessarily want it to be seen going to a convention that's about those things. So when you throw in horror, everybody goes, and you can combine the two. It's a natural combination, in my opinion. A lot of people, if you're a real horror buff, a lot of these bad guys do have some basis in reality. I mean,
Yeah.
Buffalo Bill, Norman Bates, I know I'm forgetting the third. Oh, hell, Leatherface. That's all Ed Gein.
Yeah.
So, you got Ed Gein, you got serial killer Danny Rawling down in Florida. He was very loose basis for Scream. They say he was the basis for the Scream franchise, but there's a lot of tie-ins between these guys and what you see in the horror films.
And I think it's a very organic thing, too.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Rob.
It goes even deeper than that because, I've been to my fair share of the, dark history cons, and you get into the paranormal side of things, Ed and Lorraine Warren and, all the demonology things and all that stuff. And
right.
You get into the, all that side of it, gets brought out too, because you go all the way back to Aleister Crowley and all those kind of things. And, it's like you said, some of it's, kind of taboo subject, it's a little bit,
right.
Oh my God, we're going to go see something on serial killers. And then, you turn on Netflix and the first 85 choices are, serial killer documentaries or whatever.
Right. Yeah. And and I have that problem with a lot of people when they see the imagery of the show. I shouldn't say a lot of people. The fair share of people are like, oh, you're propping these guys up. You're making them something. Why are you making them celebrities? And I explain it, the way I explain it is, unfortunately, the way we do things, that's the face you recognize. If I was to put up John Wayne Gacy's victims, nobody would know who those people are, unfortunately, by their face, and therefore they just skip on past it. But if you throw up Gacy or Pogo, that piques somebody's interest, and then you can use that opening to tell them, okay, well, Rob Peace was the last victim, and here's what happened to Rob. And you can throw in, another number of victims. And that's how I reel people in, so I can talk to them about pretty much, I mean, it's heinous shit that these guys did. And these victims went through torturous and tortures, hell, however you want to say it. They need to be just as recognized as those guys. But unfortunately in society, it's always been that way. You've had yellow journalism going way back. It's always been sensationalistic. It's just, I guess it's just our human nature.
And I think people ultimately find villains as more colorful. I think sometimes than even the villains in themselves. I don't think there's a lot of self-awareness or self-consciousness coming from these people about how they are representing themselves. It's more just the sociopathology or the psychopathology of it. But they end up unfortunately becoming these very iconic sort of colorful characters because of these eccentricities and stuff that's also involved.
Yeah. And I mean, like that old saying, if it bleeds, it leads. That's exactly what happens.
Right. So
the more extreme these guys seem to be, the more people want to hear about them.
So look at all the way back to like the comics and stuff I'm a little bit older than you are, Brian, but look back to the comics of our youth. If you remember, Batman was, he was black and gray or just all black, but the Joker was, violently colored, Riddler violently
Right.
colored, King Tut
Exactly.
all the bad guys, even as Spider-Man, it's a muted blue and red, and Green Goblin had, the bad guy is always the one that is, the peacock.
Agreed.
And I think what happens is, you see these, like you mentioned, Gacy and Pogo.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think very many people would recognize a picture of Gacy not as Pogo.
Right. I agree.
I think they see that Pogo picture and they're like, that's Gacy. But if you were to just show them a picture of Gacy out of the makeup, they'd be like, I know that face, but who is it?
I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. Yeah. And I mean, taking it even from my personal view, when we're talking about the bad guys, I mean, when Star Wars came out, I gravitated to Darth Vader. I think everybody did. I mean, and that's the bad guy. So it is what it is. Yeah. Yeah.
One whole section of my collectible
Nice.
shelf is nothing but Vader.
Yeah. So there's something to it. I suppose we would be interesting to study as far as why we're drawn to it, but it's the vast majority of people are drawn to it for some reason or another.
And I think when we look at these things, it's easier for us to concentrate on a central figure and sort of forget about the atrocities, sort of forget about the suffering of the victims, because we do delve into the psychology of it, and that sort of becomes our focus. And it's easy for us then to sort of look at the fascination behind these central figures as opposed to the victims.
Right. And unfortunately, here again, just the way things are, some of the victims, the FBI has a term they call the less dead, sex workers, homeless folks, people kind of on the fringe. It seems like if they are the victims, then it really doesn't pique anybody's interest, which is pathetic and sad. There was the myth for the longest time that there's not black serial killers. There's a lot of black serial killers, but their victims tend to be black females, and that doesn't make the news like a white blonde-haired girl. I mean, for whatever reason, and without getting into politics, that's just the way it is. So it's not that there's not black serial killers. It's just they don't get the publicity. I mean, Samuel Little, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Samuel Little. Yep. The FBI has come out and said he's probably the most prolific one we've ever had in the United States. Last I heard his count's probably around 113, something to that effect. We just don't know about it because he has said when he's been talking about this, I targeted drug addicts. I knew nobody would miss them. So, yeah, there's so many offshoots to these conversations that we can have. That's how I can talk about this all day, every day for years probably, and not ever hit all of the aspects that there are to talk about.
Yeah, I read a book. I'm kind of a Jack the Ripper.
Okay.
And I read there was a book that was put out, and I'm trying to remember the actual name of it, but they actually used to say NHI, no human involvement.
I remember that too. Yes. I wouldn't have thought of that on my own, but now that you say it, I remember seeing that. Yep.
Yeah, they referred to the prostitutes that were killed, and they were the report just said NHI, no human involved. And it's like...
And that was a little bit of the stance that some of the police were also taking around the Milwaukee area for Dahmer, because a lot of his victims were young gay males.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's definitely come out, and they can't really deny that a lot of them were just uncomfortable with the idea. I don't know that I don't want to say that they didn't want to help victims, but they didn't understand homosexuality. They didn't want to they thought it was icky, they didn't want to be involved in any of it in any way, shape, or form. I mean, the one that got away, Conrack, that they sent him back, and the radio traffic is them laughing. One homosexual male returned to another homosexual male, and they're chuckling in them. Yeah, it's a lack of understanding. It's a lack of empathy for every human being, and some of these guys definitely, whether they say they know that their victims would be missed or not missed, that tends to be the case, and I think they subconsciously know that that's the case.
Now, I don't know if we can chalk this up to just, egocentrism, especially here in the States, but do we know if there are United States levels of, obsession and fanaticism about the subject overseas? Does the UK experience the same kind of levels of interest that we do? Do we have any information on that?
I don't have any numbers. I believe the UK is pretty damn close to us, though, really, as far as their interest levels. Back when eBay was first a thing, I had a friend have it, and I was able to get, I believe it's just called True Crime Case Files or something that was published in the UK. And I picked up the one on Bundy and a few other guys, and they had published photos in these magazines from the crime scene that I had never seen before. And it's just run-of-the-mill news over there. So I think they eat it up just as much as we do. They don't like it when it's some of their own. I mean, the Yorkshire Ripper, Fred and Rose West, Ian Brady, Myra Hindley, they were all absolutely hated over there. But yet they drew huge crowds when their trial's going on. So, so make of that what you will. But I think UK is pretty damn close to us. Some of the other countries I know there's been other countries that have had killers with large victim counts, but you just don't hear about them as much. So I'm not so sure it's too many other places.
Can we all raise a glass to the demise of the early days of eBay when you could find fantastic shit that nobody else had?
Yeah. I'll raise mine.
How awesome was the early days of eBay? It was like the Silk Road of the internet back then. You could find shit on eBay you could find nowhere else.
Yeah, I had a Bundy comic that I think it was supposed to be a series, and I think they only published the one. I ended up giving it to a friend that actually lives in Australia. I mailed it to Australia to her because she wanted to have it, and I didn't have a use for it anymore. It was not too bad. I don't remember the author or anything, but it was very, very limited, and it came from eBay.
I bought Absinthe off of eBay.
Sweet. Yes.
One of my very first early purchases on eBay was, anybody remember the wrestler, Mr. Perfect?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I bought a piece of Mr. Hennig, Kurt Hennig's chewing gum that he spit out and slapped. So, yeah.
Rob, that was my chewing gum.
It could have been somebody who was just at the local diner with a putty knife,
I put one of my children through college on that chewing gum, Rob. You were had, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the splinters from Babe Ruth's bat. Yeah.
Now, Rob, how did that chewing gum taste? That's what we want to know.
It was still minty.
Was it? Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Wintergreen.
Evergreen, because it was Mr. Perfect.
Yes.
Right.
You'll appreciate this, Sean, specifically. One of my first eBay purchases, besides the fact that I went there looking for like legal substances, was I bought a bendable alien from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I wanted one like my entire life when I was a kid. I was addicted to Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, right? There was this little bookstore, not in my hometown, but within about a 30-mile radius. So whenever we would go into town, because I grew up very rural, we would always go to this bookstore because they had stacks of old Famous Monsters of Filmland magazines.
Nice.
I even had the Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, and you'll like this, Rob, where there was a writing contest. Who could write the best? It was the first chapter for the sequel to Star Wars. They actually had that writing contest about what happened to Darth Vader after his TIE fighter was spinning out of control. Like I was getting stuff that I had to have been like probably like 7, 8, 9. Like when I first started collecting shit like out of control, when the weird completist part of my brain started to kick in, where it was like, this is issue 79. There are 78 more of these before the issue that I have. And I could see like the terrified look on my parents' face, like, oh, fuck us. Oh my God. Why couldn't we get an issue 4?
Right.
It would have
Like
been so much easier.
Like I have said to you many times, and I have them right here. I wanted the Willow comic books so badly, but
man.
I would not buy them until I could get all 3.
Oh wow!
All at once, but the idea of buying number 1 and then number 3 and not having number 2.
Oh yeah.
No.
Blasphemous.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, it'll keep me up at night.
Yes.
Like, and I have horrible insomnia, anyways. Which so this is my apologies to Brian. This is what happens. This is what happens on our show. Is we have the best intentions of getting a guest on, and then we just talk about shit for an hour. So, so I have horrible insomnia, right? Like, and it's weird insomnia. Like I've had it ever since I was a kid. But I sleep for like 45 minutes. So I go to bed, I sleep for about 45 minutes or an hour, and then I wake up and I'm up. Like I'm up for like 4 or 5 hours, right? So this always happens where I get up and I'm like, oh shit. So I'll come downstairs, I'll do work, in my office. And then I get, after about 3 or 4 hours into this, I get so dead tired that it's almost, like when you look at the world and it's a facsimile of a facsimile, like it's a hall of mirrors.
Okay. Yep.
And I'll go on eBay. It's horrible. It's like the worst thing for me ever to do. And like 2.5 weeks later, my wife will bring in like a stack of boxes and she's like, what is all this? And I'm like, I've got no clue. And I honestly don't. I'm not lying. I have no idea what these boxes are. But it's like I get mini Christmases every few months, depending on how bad my insomnia is, where I'm like, I had no idea I ordered that. And I open it up. I'm like, I got myself the best present at 4:30 in the morning on eBay. And then sometimes I'm like, I've got 4 of these. Why in the world did I order one more of these on eBay? So it's a double-edged sword. But yeah, like that's my little eBay story, is that even to this day, I'll be like, how many 1981 Raiders of the Lost Ark Indiana Jones figures do I need from Kenner? Apparently it's about 4.
All of them.
Yeah, yeah, it's all of them. Because I'm like, and I would be like, don't you have that? And I'll be like, I've got a few. Like, don't you have like 4 Castle Grayskulls? That's not important right now. We don't need to talk about that. But yeah, like that's what happens. And like I miss those old days of eBay, sort of coming back full circle of that stuff where you could get stuff like that. Like you honestly could get stuff like that. Like before I was friends with this guy Hart Fisher. Hart's such an interesting guy. Anyways, so he had done, the Dahmer comic, and before that he had done this comic called Dark Angel, which everybody universally hated because it was so graphic. And I remember getting on eBay and finding that, and like finding it relatively cheaply, because it was like nobody really had price guides, and it was a huge flea market. You could get on there. People were misspelling shit. They didn't know what they had. And if you search long enough, you could be like, I got Abraham Lincoln's toothpick. I think.
Right. Yeah, certificates of authenticity.
Mr. Perfect's gum, yeah.
Right, you get Mr. Perfect's gum. And I wonder, like I honestly wonder, Brian, in those early days, how much real, authentic serial killer memorabilia passed hands back then before the online marketplace exploded.
I think a fair amount. One of the guys that's going to be at my show, his name's Joe Hiles. He's considered the godfather of murderabilia, which is a name they hate in that hobby, by the way.
Wow.
I found that out. But he's been getting his hands on stuff related to the crimes and the killers since the mid 90s. I mean, he used to go on the talk show. He went on the talk show circuit, Sally Jesse and all the other ones, where he was usually pitted as the bad guy for wanting to collect these things. But his collection dates back quite a ways. And I know a lot of it. A lot of the people that have really good pieces they just kind of communicate amongst themselves and don't throw some of that stuff out, or they didn't used to. Now, if you want to pay, a whole lot of money, you can get some of these things. Gacy paintings used to be like $40, and now they're thousands.
It was
it's
part of that like outsider art movement originally, right? When it was like not just like serial killers, but people who again were notable sociopaths, psychopaths.
Yep.
And it was this weird thing that sort of hit the art market. But
right.
yeah, you're right. It's exploded since then.
Yeah. And another one, I'm going to throw a shameless plug in. Another guy that's going to be there Saturday that hopefully you'll get a chance to meet. He's going to be with John Borowski, is Rick Staton. Rick was Gacy's art dealer. When Gacy first started doing art, Rick was his guy on the outside that would set up the art shows to show off Gacy's art and sell it. So Rick will be there. He's also an expert on the Candyman, Dean Coral, down in Houston. Rick lived down in Houston for a very long time and was a mortician funeral director down there. And he just got way into it. He's also, Borowski had a documentary called Serial Killer Culture, and that's all it talks about is why our fascination with this. And he tells me that at the convention Saturday, it's going to be the first time that a number of these guys have been together. Joe Hiles, Rick Staton himself, Steve Jean and Angelo. So they're going to have a panel on that. And that's what we're going to be talking about, is what is our fascination with these guys and why.
Now, awesome. I don't know the definitive truth on this, but I did read a book that some of Hitler's paintings are still, you're able to buy them. Like, there are collectors that have them, and
right.
Occasionally they will go, really, we need to buy a paint. I mean,
did you ever see the series Justified when it was on?
No. And
in one of the episodes, there's a guy trying to sell a Hitler painting, and it turns out to be a fake. The guy that comes in to verify that it's a fake, he tells him, I have 45 Hitlers, and he invites the U.S. Marshals to come look at him. And they both, they're just like, no, we don't have any desire to do so. By the end of the episode, I don't remember why they have to go see this art dealer, but they go to see him, and he's like, I want to show you my Hitlers. He's like, okay. He goes back to a room, and he has these little bottles that are full of ash. And he tells the story about how his dad, I think it was his dad, went through Germany at that time. And he's like, so because of that, I buy every Hitler painting that I could find, I burn it, and I save these ashes. And so, yeah, I think there probably is still a few roaming around, but I think a lot of people destroy them. I mean, that Gacy's paintings, they had a big mass burning of some of the family members. People just came and threw their stuff in there. Johnny Depp had one. He just got it because it was cool early on, and he gave it to them to throw in a big bonfire. So there might be different motivations, but there's definitely a desire for a little bit of everything. I mean, it'll sound terrible, but here again, being dark history, they do have history behind them. It is a part of our history.
And exploring, part of what we learn by exploring through, I mean, we've talked, Ted Bundy on this before, is, we've learned from some of the things that Bundy was able to articulate.
Sure. Yeah. When he actually chose to.
Right. There was a lot of speculation going on about what Dahmer could have given to, to the world,
right,
had he not been killed, because he was willing to discuss.
Yeah.
Very openly, how much we could glean of the twisted psychology from knowing these people. And I don't necessarily think it's glorifying them as much as it is acknowledging that these are some really broken people.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes. And we try to figure that out. I've had this conversation, I don't know how many times. Well, I don't think, no matter how advanced we get, no matter how many studies we do, I mean, you can hook people up to the, to the EKGs and everything else, and you can check out brain waves, and you can see thought processes and all these other things. But there is something in the physiological makeup of these folks' brains that we will never figure out. I don't care how advanced we get, you'll never figure it out. And that's why I always say that this area of study for me is I call it endlessly fascinating, because it always will be. they've never been able to reverse engineer. You know, they used to have the McDonald triad where you had your bedwetting past the age of 12, the fire setting, and the animal cruelty. Almost every serial killer that they interviewed had done those things, but everybody that has done those things doesn't become a serial killer. So that's just a great illustration of we don't know. I mean, there's been families. I mean, one family member is fine, upstanding member of society, and their brother might go out and become a serial killer. They were raised in the same household. They went through the same experiences. What was different in their brains? And we'll never find that.
Now, have you seen anything on, and this has been something that interested me, is that we, in a previous incarnation of the show, had actually one of the foremost handwriting analysts on the show. She was also the person that went on to analyze the From Hell letters.
Oh, okay. Nice.
And she talks about a very distinct sort of part of a signature that almost resembles the devil's pitchfork that a few serial killers have had in common with lowercase g's, y's, things that have tails, where with like a Y, it would come up, and that tail, instead of them ending the tail, there was a tiny bit of a loop that came back, and it almost resembled the prongs of a pitchfork.
Wow, I never heard that.
It was very, very interesting talking to her about that.
Yeah.
And she had went through several killers who, when she had taken a look at their letters, taking a look at their signatures, all of them distinctly had this pitchfork configuration on some of the lowercase tails of their letters.
Wow. Well, now you gave me something else to look into, because that is very fascinating. I had not heard that study.
And she had done a lot of work. She was at Quantico for years teaching.
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
I sort of lost contact with her, unfortunately. But one thing that I'm always very curious about, because we had EJ, who's going to be at the con.
Yep.
On
Sure
the
is.
show. By the way, she was great. She was an absolutely great guest.
I was going to say, I've only ever chatted with her through social media, and we have a blast. We talk about a lot of stuff. But yeah, it'll be my first time meeting her in person, so I'm really looking forward to it as well.
And one thing that we'd asked her, and we talked about briefly, and one thing that I kind of want to talk about with you is that this might just be popularized more sort of a cinematic fare than really, something based in reality. But occasionally you hear people talk about like Suspect Zero, or the idea that there might be a killer out there that might be responsible for large numbers of victims.
Yeah.
Is that something that's still sort of talked about as a piece of this culture?
I haven't heard the Suspect Zero terminology in quite some time. There's a decent movie, by the way, if you've had a chance to see it. There's a movie called Suspect Zero.
Does it involve remote viewing?
No,
sort of as well, and it was with like Aaron Eckhart.
It's Aaron Eckhart and oh shoot,
Was it Ben
he's
Kingsley?
excellent and everything. Ben Kingsley, yep, Ben Kingsley. It's a sound that they generate this sound, and that gets him to where he can
it's
see
like binaural, something that
yeah. But I haven't heard much about that theory anymore. I think the theory that kind of is roaming around that has also been around for years that I think somehow needs to be explored further is these traveling over the road truckers. How many victims might be out there that these guys, I mean, you're dumping them across state lines, you're going over state lines all the time. There's large numbers of victims that just bodies dumped out there that nobody can attribute to any other, to any killer. So I think that's interesting. Suspect Zero stuff. I would not at all be surprised. I think it's well within the realm of possibility that there is somebody like that. I think it's harder nowadays with the way you can, with all the forensic studies that we can do and all the forensic things that we can pick up. However, what people still don't seem to realize when they see the CSI Miamis and the CSI shows and all this good stuff is you still have to have something to compare it to. So I could leave fingerprints somewhere. If you don't have my fingerprints on a database, it's still just a fingerprint. If I leave hair all over the place and you don't have my DNA profile for any other reason, it's still just it's just hair. So I think it's still okay. I think it's still, to a point where guys can get away with things. It just seems like we catch them a lot sooner nowadays than letting them rack up the numbers that these killers from the 70s had.
You know,
Do you think that with like I'm in Rochester, New York, and
okay.
We had, serial killer capital of the world for a little while.
Yeah.
But I mean, we had the double letter murders here in Rochester, still unsolved. And but there's all these other theories because there's supposedly, double letter deaths in, I think it's Indiana, and double letter deaths in North Dakota, and double letter. So that could, kind of fall into that, over the road trucking kind of thing where.
Exactly. Yeah, somebody that travels, or I mean, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a trucker, but I mean, any businessman that's racking up all the air miles, who's to say what they're in their downtime, get a rental car, go out, do what they want to do. Any evidence if they kill somebody in the car, it's a friggin' rental car. I mean, good luck in saying, well, the reason their hair's in there is because, well, it's a friggin' rental car. So,
Brian, I got a question for you. So you were touch bases a second ago about how it's harder than a lot of people, what they don't realize when they watch like the kind of crime drama shows is that it's a lot harder to cover up the evidence or have stuff to compare to than what people think. Do you think that the advent of all this of technology of social media and do you think that makes it harder for people to get away with things? Like I watched that Don't F with Cats, that Netflix stuff, and how that group of people got was the Luca Magnotta, and they finally caught him. And it's very interesting series to watch, but I mean a lot of it was because he actually starts to toy with them even a little bit on their social media groups.
Yeah, well, Luca was just a giant piece of shit, but anyway. No, the advent of social media, the internet has definitely made it harder to get away with a lot of things. That I mean, there are people that actually call themselves web sleuths that they dedicate hours upon hours of diving into these things and trying to solve them. Just recently, I think it was last week before, they claimed the Zodiac was finally found. They finally identified the Zodiac. That was some web sleuths. I happen to know some people that are considered top-notch Zodiac guys, and they blew it out of the water right off the bat. They're like, no, it's absolutely not solved. It's still an open case. But speaking of Netflix and those things, if you get a chance to watch the Cecil Hotel one on Elisa Lam, that had a lot of web sleuths coming up with the ideas of what happened. Extremely recent, this Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito, that's all over social media, and everybody's coming up with their theories. So I think it's a great tool to have. I understand where law enforcement sometimes has an issue because everybody's advancing their theories, and it's their job. It's law enforcement's job to kind of winnow that down and see, all right, is this a good theory? Is this just a crackpot theory? So that one's another double-edged sword. I really think are they being helpful? Are they being harmful?
I think it's a hindrance because it overfloods. It's so easy to overflood the market now with information.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I certainly think it can be.
Leads,
yeah, I certainly think it can be, because you could have had, let's say a law enforcement agency developed 10 leads that seemed solid to them, and now it hits social media, and now your 10 leads has gone up to 1,000 leads, and you have to follow them. I mean, you have to at least prove or disprove that it's worth following any further. So yeah, I think that does tax law enforcement when it comes to that. I mean, the detective squads and the people, if there is a task force going, it is a burden on them that maybe wouldn't have been there pre 1990, 92, whenever the internet took off. Yeah, I think that's the case, but I also do think it's a good thing, because prior to the internet, there might have been people that might have been in the know, but didn't know how to bring that to law enforcement, where now it's easy. You just throw it at them, an email address or contact, find a phone number on the internet and call that agency. So I think there's good and bad there.
You mean Dog the Bounty Hunter wasn't, you don't think Dog the Bounty Hunter was beneficial to the Brian Laundrie case? Come on.
No, I do not.
It's strange because in a way, like, I love the fact that no matter how ineffectual it is, like, I love that we live in a world, however, that is, this is the part of the world that I love being so interconnected.
Sure.
A lot of it, I think, is unfortunately just rife with huge pitfalls, but that we live in a world where we are so socially connected that the mass involvement of people interested in this case led to Dog the Bounty Hunter getting involved.
Right.
Like it to me, like that is that is such high comedy. Like
right. Yeah.
you can't write that. It's stranger than fiction. And I sort of love that we live in a world as tragic as those events are, where it's like, I know who's going after the guy. It's Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Right. Right.
We live in that world now. Like this is our world. And that in a way is it's just so unbelievably strange, because this is not something that we would have had 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, not the level of, first of all, of public involvement, like we're talking about web sleuths or people just private, doing their own investigations.
Yep.
25, 30 years ago, that was unheard of. And now it's like, it really is that America is on the case.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Cause back pre-internet, I mean, if you threw out, say you got a newspaper article, say you were somebody that wrote op-eds and stuff like that. If you started going off in some of the directions that we go off on now, they're just, that's a National Enquirer type paper, this guy's a kook. It was easier to disregard it, I think. Now, I think this is a bad thing about where we live now, that people seem to take a lot of things at face value without doing their own research. So I think that's a bit of a problem with it, but you can also present your case a lot easier than you used to be able to. Everybody just, like I said, everybody chalk you up to being nuts previously, whereas now, if I sound halfway like I know what I'm talking about, people will buy it. So whatever that says about us as a society, there it is.
We sort of had a political leader that, rose to power with a bad haircut and grabbing women by the pussy, and somehow, 3 divorces and 5 kids from 3 different marriages and everything, but the Christians are behind him.
Yeah, Christians are behind him, and what he does and what he did do that people, and this speaks to a little bit to what I was saying, and people have pointed this out, is he talks in a way that is kind of mirrors how our collective, what do I want to say here? It's not mindset, but the way our minds work now, it's so herky-jerky.
Yeah.
Our attention spans have just diminished so much that people like our former president can just spit out stuff, not even finish a sentence, and then start another thought, and they're just like, and people follow along. Yeah, that guy's, he's throwing out a ton of shit to see what sticks to the wall, and most of it sticks because the people that really follow him are, 10, 15 second attention spans, and that's great.
And it's kind of that, there's an old saying, three can keep a secret if 2 are dead.
Yeah.
And it's that mentality. It's, like you said, he's just throwing out sound bites. And if 2 of the 95 sound bites stick, whoa.
Yeah.
The other 93 doesn't matter.
Nope. And
it's the cult of personality. I mean, not only was it a great song, but it's one of the biggest truths. We look at, we talk to the
Vernon Reid, one of my favorite guitar solos of all time.
Amazing. Yeah. I got to meet Corey Glover last month.
Awesome.
He sounds fantastic.
Yeah, he does, and he was a great guy. I mean, it was at a show that there was enough time where I could have a little bit of an interaction with him. Told him that as much as I loved that song, I actually loved the second album better, and he's like, "Oh yeah, me too." And I was like, "Okay, great." So it was just cool. Corey was great.
Open Letter to a Landlord, still my favorite.
Yep, that's way up there for me too. Yep.
Yeah, but I still will vouch for. I think that Vernon Reid is probably one of the top 5 guitarists of all time.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I wouldn't argue that.
As a guitar player, I will respectfully disagree.
Okay.
And say that he's definitely in the top, but to put him in top 5 is a little scary.
Okay.
I mean, there's
Fair enough.
guys, you start looking at, Steve Moore's, Steve Howe, guys that, totally reinvented.
All the Steves. Let's put Steve Vai in.
Yeah.
Steve Vai is near the top.
Sure.
But there's a lot of there. I just Vernon Reid is up there. He's definitely near the top.
So, well, yeah, I should qualify mine by saying that I can't read or understand anything about music. I can't play. I don't know anything about it except what I think sounds good. So, So you guys can throw that out there as much as you want to, and so my opinion is far from expert. Mine's just casual listener.
He's one of the more soulful players.
I will give you that.
That, and I think that probably greatly influences my opinion.
I have a friend that owns a winery, and she says, what the best wine in the world is? The one you like.
Yep. There you go.
And that's all that matters. It's, what you like. There are, it's, you go through, book reading and stuff like that. I'm a Stephen King fan.
Sure. Yeah, me too.
Personally, if James Patterson bores me to sleep,
never even tried him.
it's what you like. But
yeah.
So I do. So anyway, getting back to the 3 Can Keep a Secret of 2 Are Dead. You have this internet sleuth thing now where, like you were, the Brian Laundrie case and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It comes down to if there's even a mention to somebody, like, we saw them fighting in the drive-through at the Dunkin' Donuts in Moab, Utah at 2:33 and 22 seconds p.m. on, it becomes this whole thing where, like, now they're saying they might have found remains in this place in Florida.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you had the Appalachian Trail sightings, and you have Dog the Bounty Hunter flying planes over, with, coming for you, Brian. And
they did confirm that those ones in Florida are him.
Okay.
Yeah, the FBI said dental records proved that it was him. The area has been underwater until just recently because they are now skeletal remains, even though he's only been missing for a month. But that makes sense if it's underwater. I mean, you got your animal predation, and yeah, they probably picked it clean for the most part. But I had also picked up somewhere that they said there was 2 other women found dead in a campsite somewhere between where Gabby was found and where he ended up. And there's people throwing that at him too. Did he maybe kill 3 women in his last little jaunt? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there that I have not dived into. I used to have my friends and people, some coworkers that knew my hobby, would ask me on the case of the moment when Newtown happened. They asked me what I thought about Adam Lanza, and I was like, because of our media coverage now and how everybody's rushing to scoop something, a lot of that shit comes out to be that wasn't the case. That's just somebody heard something and then they reported it as the truth. So I usually wait a little while before I try to dig into it. So that way the BS can be filtered out and you can start finding the stuff that actually is provably true. So
now this, as always, is the fastest hour on the internet.
Oh yeah.
So as we have had some great conversation tonight, I do want to circle back to if you could give us some information about the hours of the con, where it's located, some of the guests, and some of the things circling around the event, things that people can see while they're there, things they can look forward to seeing. So if we could take a few minutes, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, it is at the I Hotel and Convention Center in Champaign, Illinois. Hours are 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. I tell anybody that knows the area, the place has a First Street address, but in or off of St. Mary's. It's a large complex. We're off of the St. Mary's side. If you have any Champaign U of I references, we're right next to the Assembly Hall. Guests, throw this in because you got your horror movie shirt on. My two of my big guests are Grandpa Sawyer and Pam the Meat Hook Girl from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Awesome.
They're both going to be there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they're great. I've had John one year prior, and I met Terry. I just talked to her this last weekend at a different convention, and yeah, she's fantastic. So Terry McMinn and John Dugan, Corin Nimick, Rob, you might know Parker Lewis Can't Lose, the TV series from back in the early 90s. Yep. He's Parker Lewis.
And for me, the TV adaptation of The Stand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was Harold Otter. He has actually played Richard Speck, Ted Bundy in some B movies. He was in another B movie about the Boston Strangler. So there is that. I just talked to him on the phone last night, and I was telling him about that. He also played Steven Stainer from I Know My Name is Steven. Steven Stainer was kidnapped when he was young, held captive for a couple of years, and then Kerry Stainer, his brother, went on to become a serial killer. So interesting dynamic there. But we'll have him from down by the St. Louis area. Bishop Stevens is an actor. Bishop has been in, if you follow Netflix horror movies, The Girl on the Third Floor. He had a larger role in that. He was briefly in that Nicolas Cage Moms and Dads movie. Oh, so nice. He's got a lot of work that he's done.
Nicolas Cage finds his way into everything.
Oh, he does.
I love it. I love his
new take Mom and Dad. I thought actually that was a really, really good Nicolas Cage movie.
I did too.
And especially Selma Blair, who I've always followed and I really enjoy. I thought she was great in that as well.
She can do almost anything too. Oh, I mean, Selma Blair can, because she can go from being like a sympathetic character to being this, I mean, really diabolical person. And it's easy for her.
Yeah. And apparently she's horribly stricken with MS.
I had heard that. Yeah.
And she's become a huge advocate actually for that in the entertainment arts.
That's good. And then on the true crime side, John Borowski is a documentary filmmaker. He did what it was called the Serial Killer Trilogy. It was his first film ever was on H.H. Holmes. Then he did Albert Fish and Carl Panzram, and then Serial Killer Culture. He has his newest project is on John Wayne Gacy. He's got books and the DVDs. Judith Yates is joining us from Nashville, Tennessee. She has a book out about serial killer Paul Reed that operated in Nashville. She's going to do a presentation on that. So I have almost all the presentations. They're going to be 45 to 60 minutes long. Almost all of, well, now that one had to cancel, it's all going to be true crime. We've got one on Paul Reed, the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case. I have a expert on that coming. E.J. Hammond is going to be doing a presentation on Bundy, the serial killer culture panel. John Ferrick is a writer. He was a newspaper writer and he writes books. He was from the Joliet, Peoria area. His are all on basically wrongful convictions and planted evidence in most of his books. His most recent one was on Stephen Avery from The Making a Murder. John is the only one that has been given permission from Kathleen Zellner, who's working on Stephen Avery's appeal, to look at her files to see, and he wrote a book called Wrecking Crew. So John will be there. We're going to have a couple hearses there at the front doors for people to look at. We got a Toys for Tots drive that a friend of mine put together with a giant coffin that he's hoping to fill with toys. Numerous vendors, apparel, artists, some vulture culture, if you're familiar with that, using bones and implementing that into art. Some wet specimens. We've got the Film Fest also, which is all submitted independent films from literally around the world. I know I have one from Greece. I think I've got one from Hungary that are on there. Those are more documentaries, but they're also horror films in there. Lots and lots of stuff. Come at 11 and stay until 8. You'll get a chance to see it all.
So what you're saying is that you don't have a lot going on at all.
No, not a whole lot. Not really. And it's, I guess I should throw out there, the advance tickets, they're on Eventbrite on our Facebook page. That link is on there. Those go off. They stop selling at 3:00 Central tomorrow. You can absolutely buy tickets at the door. That's where we do most of our business. It's the same price. It's $15. You get all of this for $15. You come into the place, you can go watch a panel, you can go watch movies, and then you can walk around the floor and meet everybody. It's $15.
That's awesome. That's a hell of a deal.
Yeah, that's
I'd like
incredible.
to think so.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wish more people would adopt your model.
Well, I have always said, and I know I end up talking too much, but it's a family. A lot of the people that come to me, we all enjoy this thing. We get to where we like each other. I have people come back to my show just because they know they're going to see so-and-so. And it becomes a networking thing. It becomes everybody just hangs out and has a good time. I know I can't afford, $50, $60 conventions and $100 autograph sessions. I never want to do that. Even if I get to where I'm drawing thousands upon thousands, it's still going to be affordable for people like me. I mean, that's where it's at. The people that really have a passion for this stuff, they need to be able to be there too. And it doesn't need to be a bank breaker. So I appreciate that, Rob. Thank you.
It's awesome. I wish I could be there. I mean, if it wasn't 400 and 500 miles away, I'd be there for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say that because, I don't remember Rochester area. I was going to say our Shawcross wasn't Rochester.
Oh, yes,
Shawcross was he Rochester? Okay, I was going to say the Genesee River. I don't know my geography there, so.
Yep, I have a very good friend that worked at a staffing agency that actually got Arthur Shawcross a job.
Oh, wow.
No shit.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean, if we had time to delve into him, I mean, he was one of the ones that I think he reveled in the idea of talking about his stuff, even though most of it was provably false. So, yeah, and I think the only other one that I can think of over there that had a lot to do with something was the Torso Killer Cunningham, but I know he was in the city, New York City. So
we had Buono and Bianchi are both ties to Rochester.
Oh yeah, yep.
Jack the Ripper, one of the, again, I'm a Ripper file.
Sure.
Francis Tumblety, buried here in Rochester, grew up in Rochester, New York.
Okay. I know the name, but I didn't realize he was there. Yep.
The Double Letter Murders. You had, what's his name? The Boston Strangler. DeSalvo had ties to Rochester, New York.
Okay.
We had them all. It's
okay.
Kodak, and the chemicals at Kodak made them all go crazy.
There you go. Well, I think the Flatlands of Illinois did it for our people, so there you go.
Well, and here's an interesting story that you might enjoy, Brian.
Sure.
Is that so as a person who watches a lot of horror films, usually around September, October, I'm asked to go places, speak on horror films, speak on horror film history. Yeah. So October's pretty active for me. So
I imagine
not last year, but the year before, I did a presentation at the Rotary Club in Springfield. They wanted someone to come talk about filmmaking and movie making.
Okay.
And a person came up to me afterwards and had talked about, and I believed he had talked about in his late teens, early 20s in Chicago, he was struggling with alcoholism. And he was in his car drinking a beer, pulled up at a stoplight, looked over at the car beside him, and a guy held up a 6-pack of beer.
Yeah, okay.
And motioned for him to turn. So they go into a parking lot. He gets into the guy's car. They have a couple beers. A few weeks later, he's watching television, and they're pulling, pieces of Gacy's house apart, and they show a picture of Gacy, and that was the guy that he had his 2 beers with.
Yeah, that's nuts. But that's another fascinating thing that nobody talks about is all these encounters that people have had with these guys that they didn't end up being a victim, and why?
Right, that didn't result in their untimely death. And he said that the entire time he'd got the notion that it was like a seduction kind of play. That the guy was wanting him to get more and more drunk, and even in Gacy had told him several times, "Don't worry about how much you drink. We can always get more." And at that point, the guy who was not homosexual said, "Nah, dude, I think I'm good. Thanks for the beer," and said that he was very pleasant when he said no, and that was the end of their encounter. But just very, very bizarre. That I guess he thought, again, because we have that relationship of horror films and serial killer sort of phenomena, that he just felt the need to unburden himself all of a sudden. It was just like, hey, to let you know, back when I was a raging alcoholic, this encounter I had was actually with Gacy. But the story.
I've got a question. Can I ask one more question? And it ties into something that Ash was just saying. Did you ever hear the story that Debbie Harry, Blondie,
I know where you're headed. Yeah.
Okay. Supposedly she Ted Bundy tried to pick her up or did pick her up or something along these lines.
Yeah, that is what she has stated. I think EJ has weighed in by saying she doesn't believe that story to be the case. Okay. Not calling Debbie a liar, but saying that she might have just been not remembering things the right way. Kevin Sullivan is another guy. I think he's down by Louisville. He's written a number of books on Bundy. He's made that kind of his life study. And he's also said that he doesn't believe that's the case. So
okay. Just one of those things that you hear.
Just one of those things. And I don't think there's anything malicious by her making that claim. She could have had an encounter with somebody that kind of looked like him, and it could have started to go bad, but I just don't think there's anything out there to say that it was Ted.
Well, again, this is the fastest hour on the internet. We always have a fantastic time every Thursday. We want to thank you so much for being on, Brian. Do you have a few moments off the air for us?
Yeah, of course.
I want to thank everyone who's been in and out of chat tonight. We've had a lot of good people here. God, there were a couple questions I was wanting to get to, but unfortunately, it just sort of fell by the wayside because we had so much to talk about tonight.
I'm sorry.
So that was this is all of us. We're so interested in the things that we talk about. You know, for us, it's not just about getting together and doing a podcast. It's about the fact that we get together and we talk about things that we're genuinely interested in. So every week, it's like we can't wait to talk to our guests, and then we're in the middle of it going, God, I wish we had 3 more hours. You know,
right?
You just have to come back on.
Yeah, that's what it is. You got to come back on.
Anytime.
So we had a great show tonight. Again, thanks everyone who came in and out of chat on all of our multiple sources, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook. This will also be on horror-fix.com. As soon as we can get it up there, it's accessible 24 hours a day on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, and on Twitch after it airs live. I want to encourage everyone to go to the Dark History and Horror Con in Champaign, Illinois. That is the Saturday, the 23rd, and that'll run till 8 p.m. Also, Holes in the Sky, which is a film I directed, will be playing at the film festival there. And we've had a lot of people in the Springfield area specifically who have been looking for a local festival to see the film. So we're hoping to get some Springfield people over there because we've been playing everywhere from New York to Tucson and everywhere in between, and we're finally able to get something local. So
the award-winning film.
It's I know it's in Block B. Forgive me, I've got all of my stuff scattered out since it's a day and a half away from showtime, so I don't remember my start times for Block B, but I know for a fact it's Block
2:30.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you, Sean.
I'll be watching it.
And for those of you who are interested, yes, in the time that we've actually had our last podcast in this, we have now won 5 awards. We are nominated for another 4.
Very nice. Very nice.
Awesome. So we're very, very happy with all the press and everything that we've got for the film, and we can't wait for people to come to the Dark History and HorrorCon and watch it this weekend. So thank you so much, Brian. As always, we've had a fantastic time tonight. Everyone who's listened to the show, stay tuned next week. Hopefully we'll bring you something just as exciting. Have a great night.